Welcome, friends. My name is Jay Johns, founder and CEO of 3R Interactive, LLC. And today, in our caffeinated advice conversation here, I want to talk to you a little bit about residual income and the notion of working specifically for residuals rather than, sort of the standard way of getting paid up front or once a job is done, you're actually going to be working quote unquote for free until the product sells, and then you get a small percentage of each sale. So in theory, this is a great option for a lot of people, particularly if you don't have money up front, right? Like if a project's going to take, tens of thousands of dollars, if not more, then yeah, figuring out a way to organize things with a, a team of people or a group of people in order to really just knock something out and hopefully make a decent amount of money on the back end is great. And I don't want to dissuade anyone from actually doing it, but I do want to make sure that people understand what they're getting into. And what I recommend as putting a little bit of limitation on it, just so that way you don't sort of get caught in these loops that I've noticed in my career and for people that I know who's gone into this. So as my background being in game design, I see this happened a lot. There's a lot of people, because inherently video games, especially back when I first really started, which was the 2007-ish range, the indie development scene wasn't as prevalent, and so there wasn't as easy access to development tools like Unity and Unreal and all that stuff weren't free, so you had to pay. And I think it was just Unreal at the time. There was a few other options out there, but pretty much it wasn't as it is now. Like the barrier to entry now is just zero. It's download one of these many tools and just start building, right? It wasn't like that back then. And I'm glad that the changes have happened, but people have had to sort of figure out other ways to do it, especially if they're getting into situations where they want to learn how to build things. And so I viewed a lot of teams, and I was on a few teams that was set up 100% to be residual. And again, as I mentioned, there's a lot of pros to it, especially if you don't have any money, but the cons are, the most prevalent con is that the project won't ever get finished. That happens for a lot of reasons, but the main reason is that if you're not getting paid to do something, and this happens in the startup world a lot too, not specifically just game design, but just in any project, if you're not getting paid to do something, there's going to be a few weeks or a few months that might pass when everything's humming along, but then people still need to eat, people still need to pay rent, people still need to keep the lights on. So they'll have to start doing things that pay the bills, right? That get income. And then all of a sudden, what you're doing that's for free for residuals starts to become the last thing you do that week. And eventually it becomes something you just don't ever get to because you have other things that start occupying your time, that you sort of, it starts with you having to do it because you need to make money. So hopefully, knowing this, you can do a few things to help you along, right? So you can make sure that your development cycle isn't that long at all. Like, make really small projects. Don't do what a lot of people did back when I was getting into it and try to make these massive projects. Even as a development company now, we try not to make things in a big way, because the bigger your initial design concept, the less likely you are to finish it. I mean, that's just a thing. So that's a big one, is making sure that your development time, how big your scope isn't very big, and that you can sort of have this understanding that because you're asking people to work for free up front, the deadlines are going to naturally have to be extended. But because of that extension, the likelihood of you finishing becomes less and less and less and less. So you have to do things to kind of combat that. And what I would recommend, especially when it comes to like signing contracts, I might be jumping around a little bit, but if you're going to be signing contracts that deal with being paid from a residual situation, I've switched over to only having that contract be for like a year or two. So basically, from the date of launch for that particular project, then the residuals will happen. And I started doing this as someone who was working for residuals, not just as a company that might offer that. And I've sort of steered away from trying to do the residual thing as a company. I'm not opposed to it at all, but it would have to be the right kind of project at this point, because so being in the game design industry and trying to do things as an indie developer, I've worked in a lot of projects like that, but sort of just trying to do a lot of different things and trying things as a company. I did a lot of that kind of stuff, just trying to get in and sort of making my name for myself in the tech world. I did a lot of projects without necessarily being paid until residuals happened. And so there was a few that I tried setting up that way myself as a company, and so anyway, back and forth, the thing that I settled on, which works really well, I think really works really well in my opinion, is having a deadline on whatever the residuals are. So let's just say that you set the residuals up to be that you'll get whatever your percentage is for a year or two or whatever it is, starting from the date of launch. And that could also include, make sure that you want to include things like if there's any additional things that come about it, like not just the sale of the product, but also like if there's any additional merchandising, if there's like a variety of other ways that money can be made from this product, that you are also cut into that yourself. And the benefits to having there be like a deadline to that is that um, you don't really want to be chasing people down 5 years from now um, to try to convince them to show you their financial reports so that way you can then collect the few dollars you probably have gotten. You see what I mean? Like um, the longer the project has gone on for, the less likely it's making money. I mean, there's a few outliers that have existed, like 3 years after a song has been released is when it hits for whatever reason, and now it's this massive thing. But it's not super common, and it's not something that you should bet on happening. So, um, yeah, I think it's really important to have some sort of deadline, so that way it's peace of mind for you as the person working on it. It's peace of mind of the people that are sort of managing it all. Um, do I think that's a hard and fast rule that you should do that? No, because I think, especially if you look at like the music, you're not the music, but the movie industry, people talk about how like 15 years later from a thing that they did, they're still getting residual checks. So it's really just something that is going to be up to you. I highly recommend though that if you're going to do that, that it's through something that's not just, it's through like a secondary company. Let me tell you what I mean. So like, um, I got into audiobooks for a while there where I was helping people create them, and I'm actually still in doing that, I guess, but it's sort of phased out a little bit, but I'll get back into it. um, and I also produced a couple with my voice in it. And the way that it works is I went through Audible, and so Audible is sort of the in between myself as the person who was doing the voiceover and the writer. So it's not like I have to specifically focus on what the writer's doing, what the you know, like tracking down the person who happens to be the writers and asking them for financial statements and all that stuff. It's all coding through Audible, and it's Audible who ends up paying the split. So anytime there's a sale, it's very easy. Like you can just see, yes, there was a sale for that. And this is what your cut is going to be. And then this is, whenever it's dispersed into your bank account. So, if you're gonna if you have the luxury of setting up that way to where it's going to be put somewhere, but then that particular service does split outs to where everyone who's sort of a part of it can put in whatever the percentage is, and then that is just automatically dispensed out. Perfect. But if you have to deal with, like I said, trying to get bank statements, trying to get sales reports, trying to like 2 or 3 years after, and then you have to get into this weird thing of like, do you still trust the people? Do they actually, if they tell you they haven't made any sales, do you believe them? You see what I mean? Like, it can be really hairy. So I would say, like I said, I'm not specifically saying not to ever do residuals, just sort of be aware of what can happen. And I highly recommend putting some sort of limit on it, especially if you are sort of working with an independent company. So let's say you work with my company, 3R Interactive, and we have a deal that's going on that's you create graphics for the video game we're working on, and then you get a percentage of each sale. So if we did that, where you then have to rely on 3R Interactive to then make sure that we're keeping track of everything, then I would say for sure put some sort of hard deadline on it, because it'll make your life simpler. It makes our life simpler. Like, everyone's just happier. If there's some sort of secondary market, like let's say that, I don't know if it's like this yet, but let's say that the platform Steam or Nintendo Switch or anything like that, where you can sell games like the Nintendo platform, Sony platform, Microsoft platform, they allow for whenever there's a sale that you can split things out into different people. That would make more sense. Then it's like, hey, then feel free to keep that residual thing going for as long as the product exists, because then you're not having to deal with individual people. You're dealing with the company that the product is on, if that makes sense. You're dealing with a secondary market that, you're more likely to trust. So that's a couple of big things that I would recommend. And just know that if you're trying to set up a team in which everyone works for residuals only, that it's going to be really hard to manage, and that inherently timelines have to be longer, because you're asking people to work for free and then they have to do other things to make money to make sure that they can survive. So um, timelines get pushed back and back, but then that's also the problem, is that the longer timelines get pushed back, then the likelihood of not being a successful completion is just, it goes higher and higher and higher. So keep your projects short. Um, Make sure that they're not super complicated and they're not massive and huge and will take, years to make, because they just will never get done. I mean, there's always lottery winners, there's always outliers, but like, I've been doing this long enough to know that it's not going to get done. It just won't. So yeah. Um, I feel like there's a point that I want to hit, but I'm missing out on. So I'll have to circle back to this topic at another time that we meet. But all in all, going after, working specifically for residuals is a pretty good option here and there. When it comes to the Audible stuff, I think I've made more money long term since it's been out for quite a few years, like 3 or 4 years, than I would have if I just accepted the base fee for per hour of being a narrator. So it's sort of like, not every project's going to be like that, and not every situation is going to fall. So it's just one of those, what's going to work best for you? Do you have time that's going to fit within your schedule as it is to allow for unpaid hours? Um, and So I just want everyone to be sort of aware of the situation before they get into it. I want you guys to be set up for success. And I wish that all of you have great projects that come out. I'm excited to see them. And definitely reach out to me at j@3rinteractive.com. And I look forward to seeing your projects. Talk to you soon. Have a good rest of your day.